All righty. Guess time is now. Good morning, all. Mahesh Narayanan. I lead the product management for several investments and initiatives in Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability. Super happy to be here. First of all, it's nothing like directly interacting with all of you who have been so instrumental in helping us with sustainability data solutions in Microsoft Fabric. This is a new capability that what we've been working in Microsoft Fabric, and I'm super happy to announce that we are general availability. How many of you, a show of hand, how many of you attended yesterday's Arun Ulagarajagan's Microsoft Fabric session? Fantastic. You must have seen this particular solution getting announced as general available as part of that. Super delighted to get into the details of what this offering is all about and stuff. All right, on the agenda, basically, very simple agenda. The initial 2 points is more of an anchor points for us to understand why sustainability is important. I'm pretty sure this is top of mind for all of us. We all would be able to relate to various different aspects that I'm going to speak over here. And also trying to look at why sustainability is a big data problem is another one which we would like to spend some time on. And then we're going to take a journey into the sustainability data solutions in Microsoft Fabric. We're going to look at it in broad 3 perspectives, trying to understand data translations, data augmentation, and data intelligence, right? Super happy also to share dear partners like UST Global, who has helped us in validating this particular capability and how they have provided constructive feedback and improvements for us to take things towards the general availability and stuff, and happy to share their journey as well, as part of the process. Alrighty. I'm planning to just give a high-level view with a small video here on how industry solutions in Microsoft Fabric is helping, by and large, several industry vertical customers and stuff. It's a short video. The primary idea is, or primary intent is basically to just give a feeler of how Microsoft Fabric and the industry solutions in Microsoft Fabric is helping the customers, right? Let's go through the video, and then I'll quickly jump into the sustainability topic.
Accelerate the transformation of your data into business value with industry solutions in Microsoft Fabric, featuring connectors, data models, and purpose-built applications that are ready to deploy out of the box. But unlocking that potential starts with a unified pool of data. How do you pull this specialized information into a cohesive, compliant, actionable source of truth? It starts with unifying your data through connectors built for industry needs and regulations. Bring in data from on-premises devices, relational databases, media, and more, and connect your existing industry-specific systems to Microsoft Fabric, paving the way for your AI journey. Next, harmonize and enrich your data with industry-standard models, pre-built in Microsoft Fabric. Structured and unstructured data can be brought together to provide industry context and accelerate data projects. Whether optimizing patient care or evaluating carbon emissions, better data models lead to better data decisions. Finally, activate industry scenarios with purpose-built solutions that matter to your industry. Kickstart the development phase and utilize out-of-the-box templates that are ready to deploy. Combine Microsoft Fabric low-code and generative AI capabilities to enhance your industry-specific solutions and get to insights faster. Across industries, Microsoft Fabric is supercharging ROI, increasing productivity, and delivering enhanced business results. Learn more about the industry solutions that are relevant to your business and make better decisions based on better data.
Fantastic. Hope that was helpful. Quickly getting to the topic, sustainability, why sustainability is important. And this is something which I'm pretty sure most of us would be able to relate to. We're clearly seeing a lot of regulations getting defined, redefined, and refined. There's increase in regulations which we all need to be compliant about. We also see a great degree of accountability from a sustainability point of view that which we need to cater to from a business perspective. And this accountability is something which we need to help with our customers, investors, partners, and even government agencies. And there's a great deal of environmental impact, how we are trying to really contain that and substantiating some of those initiatives is something which we all need to share out as well. So we clearly see that as a challenge that which we need to gear in solving. We're also seeing sustainability being in a prime time at this point, at this point in time, where we are clearly seeing a lot of business strategies and sustainability-related initiatives getting really merged together in offering interesting value prop, both from market opportunity point of view as well as in a business perspective. Now, all of this is not possible if you're not having a single viewpoint of data. And today, that is a challenge, at least for many customers, right? Because the data are in silos. We are not able to really process this particular data for us to get to certain level of analytics viewpoint through which we are able to really make certain data-driven decision or intelligence-based decision-making and stuff. So that's one of the key challenges as well that we are facing in trying to solve these particular problem, right? From a big data problem point of view, we're clearly seeing, regulations has been for, around 1,000+ regulations, and things are still emerging. There are a lot of data points, which these regulations required with fine nuances and highly subjective requirement. And it is just not about producing the data for these particular, regulatory directives, but then it's also about substantiating with evidences and many such kind of a data. We're also seeing environmental impact with not just carbon emissions, but then water, waste, pollution, many other indexes like sustainability topics, which we all need to be on top of when it comes to managing and addressing the business's requirement and stuff. All of this is really coming together as a big data challenge from a sustainability point of view. So how are we trying to solve this? So this is where sustainability data solutions in Microsoft Fabric is really trying to help customers in meeting these challenges or taking on these particular challenges with a little bit more control on top of the data and stuff. So let's just take a quick view of what is sustainable data solutions in Microsoft Fabric. This is a prepackaged offering which we help customers to leverage some of the core components of Microsoft Fabric. But then it is just not about Microsoft Fabric artifacts. They all have been curated for sustainability-related requirements. For example, lakehouses are with ESG data model, which is highly schematized for various different regulatory and analytics kind of a requirement. So there is a very comprehensive and extensible schema that what we have as part of a lakehouse. We also have several data pipeline and data flows built for customers to really go leverage in bringing in the data into the sustainable data solutions, right? And that said, customers can really go and bring in more data from diverse different data sources into the system, leveraging Microsoft Fabric's huge list of connectors and stuff, and they can really build those data pipelines with those connectors. We have built ESG metrics capability, which is something unique that what we are offering, which is actually to streamline and have a better orchestration layer when it comes to tackling the regulatory reporting requirements when it comes to metrics attributed to different disclosure requirements. And that's something which is of a great interest for customers, and we have been making a lot of improvements on that. We made certain investments which we are trying to advance into several other regulatory directives as well. Then, of course, reporting and analytics dashboard. Now, all of this is pre-packaged from a sustainability point of view, right? Now, what does this enable? This enables the customers to really quickly focus on bringing together the data and curate the data for various different consumption requirement, and also integrate with various downstream application systems, right? This could be for your report and auditing purposes, or even for your line of business applications. And and of course, from a dashboard and leveraging BI tools as well as part of the same. So giving a quick view of the user persona dimension here. So who are the typical users that what we have seen for sustainable data solutions, right? Often we have seen data engineers spending a lot more time in creating the sustainability data lake, as part of their ESG data estate requirement. And this is for really standardizing the data for various different sustainability initiatives and reporting needs. Sustainability practitioners would like to leverage some of these curated data for various different reporting and compliance and even reduction related strategies and planning the reduction strategies, if I may. Data scientists are involved in really creating some of the custom, actionable custom insights with predictive analysis, forecasting, and many such, right? So we have seen different class of user personas leveraging Fabric and sustainable data solutions extensively to meet the sustainability kind of need. Moving forward, as I mentioned, sustainable data solutions is a prepackaged offering. Now, that's a solution, right? This solution is also having several capabilities that is shipping as part of this offering. And we'll double-click into it as part of our demo experiences. But then here is a quick view of the 5 capabilities that what we are offering as part of general availability. We have created this way so that we really cater to specific personas' need when it comes to these capabilities. For example, environmental data and insights, we typically imagine an IT administrators extensively using it. And this is all about being on top of environmental footprint. This could be carbon, water, waste, pollution, and many such kind of indexes. And this particular solution helps in integrating with several first-party, third-party systems, which is handling sustainability management today or even otherwise. Social and governance insights is largely curated for HR, finance kind of a stream of product lines. And we offer rich insights when it comes to these indexes. This is one of those particular product line which is quite competitive, I would say, in the market when it comes to rich indexes that what we offer from regulatory point of view. Then, of course, our ESG metrics. This is a capability that what I just alluded to earlier, which helps in sustainability practitioners to leverage it to quickly meet their regulatory standard and requirements. Now, all of these 3 solutions, you could extensively use this for your line of business applications or your workloads. But when you have these workloads run on Azure, then you would like to be interested to see how the emissions of Azure is also really catering to some of the scope 3 dimension of insights, and which is where the Azure emissions insights is going to help customers with a very granular level of looking at emission information based on the usage of the Azure resources. We look at it at subscription as well as at a resource level. Now, all of these 4 solutions have just one common sustainability data lake, that is the ESG data estate. That's a solution which helps in streamlining the entire sustainability data, business data, reference data, like your organizational structure data, all of that into one data estate to meet your sustainability requirement and stuff. All right. So as I mentioned, we're just going to take the journey now to double-click into into the sustainable data solutions into 3 broad categories: the data translation, data augmentation, and then the data intelligence piece. So let's just delve into the data translation piece. So what is data translation? We just spoke about this diverse set of data sources from which we need to bring in different data for us to really get to meet the need of ESG or sustainability topics. And this requires certain translations, and the translations require obviously certain transformation logics, and which is what we have pre-built into some of our offering, as well as customers can leverage some of the data flow kind of a technology in the Fabric to go build their own translation logic as well. We also offer the sustainable data lakes with which has a transformation logic for us to customers to quickly get a view of ESG kind of a data, as well as the Azure emissions data. Getting into the demo, let's take a quick walkthrough of discoverability of sustainable data solutions in Microsoft Fabric and how do customers get to deploy it, and also understand what does one sustainable data lake really mean. That's something which we'll take through as part of a demo. All right. So this is the landing page experience of Microsoft Fabric, where you can see in the workloads view, there's an industry solutions. And the industry solutions have several industry solutions like retail solutions, healthcare, and sustainability solutions. This particular page gives you a lot of information with regard to each of these particular solutions that you can take an offline look at. Once you deploy the solution, here is the 5 capabilities that I just alluded to, which would be able to deploy. And the first solution that ideally required to deploy is the ESG data estate. When you deploy the ESG data estate, you can see there are several artifacts of Fabric that gets deployed as part of this particular solution. They are like your 3 data lakes, what we call as the ingested, processed, and computed data lakes. You can also equate them to your bronze, silver, and gold based on the medallion architecture. We also have a data lake where we have the configuration and the demo information stored. And the demo data is largely for you to quickly understand the capabilities of sustainable data solutions with the demo data. And then, of course, there are a bunch of notebooks that is going to help you with data transformation, data quality checks, and having the data processed into your processed ESG data lake. Now, if you really look at, now we'll just try to zoom in each of these different data lakes. We're going to quickly run about the notebook, which is going to help in bringing the configuration of the demo data. And once you have that, now we are going to look at the ingested raw data lakehouse. Typically, ingested raw data lakehouse is the place where you would be bringing in various different data from your business systems that's relevant for your sustainability, so that you can start, curating the data for your, sustainability-related requirements and stuff. And here, it need not be about, copying the data from various different systems into this particular lake, but then you could also leverage the shortcut capability of bringing the data from, a Dataverse kind of a system, which is Microsoft Sustainability Manager, for various different data that you can bring in into your lakehouse from a shortcut point of view, right? And then there is processed ESG lakehouse. We have the notebooks, which is going to help in transforming this particular data from ingested data lakehouse into your processed ESG data lake schema. Now here you can see the various different tables are already schematized. We have various different sustainability topics-based tables that has been created, and all the data that what you have got into the ingested lakehouse is able to be transformed to the processed ESG data lakehouse. Computed ESG metrics is far more refined. Typically, we have it as a practice that the computed ESG metrics is something which is curated the data for certain consumption requirement. It could be for your reporting requirement or your analytics kind of a requirement. And that requires a different level of transformation. So we again, transform that particular data and then start, organizing the data into various different, tables, which is going to help you in consumption. For example, the aggregate data, the year-on-year aggregation or month-on-month aggregation. Now that could be for the emissions, and there are several other sustainability topics like that you could be actually organizing the data with. So all of this is how we get to start the setup of the sustainable data solutions with the ESG data estate, and and understanding about the three lakehouses, including the config and demo lakehouse as well. Moving to the next scenario, we'll try to just take a sneak peek into some of the data that what we are able to bring into the lakehouse. Maybe the scope 3 emission, which is kind of tracked in the Azure SQL, by customers, or we are bringing in some of the reference data, which is typically your organization data or facility data, all of that which you have today as part of the Microsoft Sustainability Manager, along with several other environmental data we would be able to bring into your lakehouse, right? We'll try to take a look at some of those scenarios as well. So here is the ingested raw data lakehouse, and we typically, as I mentioned, we're bringing in data from the MSM, and at this point in time, we're trying to bring in your organization data from Microsoft Sustainability Manager. So here you can see your facility data that you're able to bring in, which has already been organized in Microsoft Sustainability Manager, or the organization data, along with several other environmental data you would be able to bring into the lakehouse. And all of this is shortcut. You're not actually copying the data into your lakehouse. You're able to bring in the scope 3 emission as well, from an Azure SQL, which is a backend where it is getting stored today. You're able to bring that kind of information also into your lakehouse, right? Once you bring this data into the lakehouse, now you would be running your data transformation logic for you to actually have the ingested data lakehouse transformed into the schema that what we have built into our silver lakehouse or the processed lakehouse, right? And so here we're going to run the notebook, and once you have this particular notebook run from, and this is just giving you a view of the ingested raw data lakehouse, and here is the notebook that what we are, the processed ESG data lakehouse. And then when we are having some of the notebooks running, here is the transformation logic that what we're doing for water data or the scope 3 raw data. All of that can be basically run, and now we get the transformed data stored in your process lakehouse. And you can look at the process lakehouse, highly curated for various different requirements. There you go. So it has the connotation of your, for your emissions data or your water data, it has your connotation with regard to your, facility and your organization, all of those information stored over there. OK, now what we have done here is we have broadened the data into the process lakehouse, and we are trying to look at yet another data set that what we can bring into a process lakehouse, which is the Azure emissions data. And for which we have a separate capability known as Azure Emissions Insights. This capability helps in connecting to your Azure resources to get all the data, and we have a backend pipeline which is going to help with all of those information that you can bring into a lakehouse. Once you have this deployed, now you can see as part of the deployment, we do not have any separate lakehouse that has got created as part of this capability, because we're going to leverage the ESG data estate from a lakehouse point of view. What we have over here is just notebooks and semantic model for us to bring in the data and curate the data for processed data lake. And this is your ingested raw data lake, where you're able to see all of these JSON objects, which is the emission information from Azure. And here you can see now in the computed ESG lakehouse, you can look at each of the emission information for various different subscription and the resource, from which Azure region this particular resource is. All of this information is now as part of your computed ESG lakehouse. And we also offer rich dashboard through which you would be able to really look at various different aspects of emissions, trend of the total emissions for all the Azure usage that you're consuming. You're able to look at the top contributing subscriptions, resources that is actually having more emissions, segmentation of emissions in the context of various different services. We also help with certain comparison of subscriptions from an emission point of view. Here you can look at there's a subscription 10 and an 8 in a different region, which you're able to compare against various different resources, which might be of interest when you're trying to look at a workload that you're running in Azure, and you would like to leverage some of these resources in the context of emissions. You would be able to determine that. So this is all about Azure Emissions Insights, which is providing you rich insight when it comes to how Azure usage is contributing to your workload from an emission perspective. Now, all what we saw here was from a data translation point of view, which is about bringing in the data from diverse different systems and then curating the data into your processed lakehouse, which is having the standard schema. And then you're able to take it into your computed ESG lakehouse, where you're able to really purpose that particular data for various different reporting and analytics kind of a requirement, or even integrating with several business applications that you might be having. Now let's take a look at what is data augmentation, right? So the data augmentation is more a capability, for helping the customers to curate this particular data for various different purposes, right? Now, when you're looking at certain regulatory requirement, there are need for certain sustainability data for certain sustainability topics that needs to be purposing for certain metrics of a disclosure requirement, and there's a whole lot of information that needs to be processed and curated for many of those regulatory reports. And that's just one part of the augmentation. Like that, there could be different augmentation for your analytics requirement or your audit requirement and stuff. So here, what we have done is more so from the perspective about, from a reporting point of view, is what we are just trying to, walk through some of the use cases. And it is just not the data. We also need to augment that particular data with certain evidences, substantiation for assurance auditors, when it comes to looking through those particular sustainability topic, related metric and data, and then helping the auditors to really audit the information that has been shared against a disclosure requirement. Now here is a high-level view of what does a sustainability or ESG metric look like. Over here, you can see it as the definition has a name of a specific sustainability topic. It's attributed to emissions from a topic point of view. There's compute logic, which is what is the value of the overall ESG metrics capability. You can look at several aspects over here, an aggregation from a source point of view, unit of measure point of view, from a reporting year context. All of that is kind of defined as part of the compute logic. And then there is an output format, which is something which we need to be attributing to various different disclosure requirements for various regulatory directives. We also help in labeling each of these ESG metric so that it helps in mapping to the appropriate disclosure requirement of a regulatory directive. So let's look at the demo in how a sustainability expert can configure these particular metrics and then are able to really attribute it to some of the regulatory directives. Here is another solution or capability that we would deploy as part of sustainability solutions known as the ESG metrics. We have already had it deployed. And as part of the deployment, you can look at there are various different artifacts that gets deployed as part of the overall offering. This involves semantic model, notebooks, report, and then several other notebooks when it comes to aggregation of the data for certain sustainability topics, right? And here is a quick view of metrics definition. Now, the definition that I just gave a walkthrough, all that is there here for different metrics that what we have pre-built. And this is not just about, you can go leverage what has been pre-built, but then you can go and add your own metric over here, depending on the kind of a disclosure requirement for which you need to be creating these metrics for. And all the information related to the measurement name, the sustainability topics, dimensions, filters, all of that is captured here as part of the metric definition. We also help with labels, which I just alluded to earlier. And now you can look at that particular label having information related to disclosure requirement for what disclosure, like a CSRD in case of a European Union, and which is a metric ID and stuff. Now, this comes handy when it comes to associating this specific metric to a specific disclosure requirement for a regulatory directive. Now, this is a process now. We created the metric definitions, and we have the metric label. All of that is in place. Now we need to really bring the data into these particular metrics so that when a customer is able to attribute a metric to a specific disclosure requirement, we are able to see that even this particular data gets, as part of that. So there's a data pipeline which is going to help in processing this particular data. It's the loads definitions. It creates these aggregate metrics. It also generates the output format for those particular metrics, and then it's able to curate some of those as part of notebooks for certain consumption use cases and stuff. So here, the entire data pipeline is run, and we have the curated experience now. Now, all of this emissions aggregate is based on, for a specific metric, the entire data that has been processed and it's been stored as part of the emissions aggregate. And like emissions, there are other sustainability topics as well over here. As you can see, there are water utilization, water storage aggregate, and Azure emissions, all of those. So this one is the data augmentation, area. Now let's try to visualize what is the metrics that has been created, and let's try to understand how that can be leveraged by an auditor from assurance perspective. So here is a view as part of the same ESG metrics capability. There's a dashboard that what we offer where you can look at for each of the different metrics, how has been the trend of that particular metric. The metric value itself can be seen over here, to which year that metric is, what is the unit of measure. All of that information is here. You're able to look at it in the context of a country or a region or a facility that what you have, scope from a 1, scope 2, or a scope 3 point of view. All of that you can able to relate to it. And now, when it comes to the auditing, we are having an integration with Microsoft Purview. And the Microsoft Purview Connection Manager would help in relating to all these particular metrics and show it as part of the disclosure requirement that is part of the Purview Compliance Manager. Now, the Purview Compliance Manager has a connector, Sustainable Data Solutions, which helps in connecting to an instance of Sustainable Data Solutions. In Microsoft Fabric, it provides all the necessary experience for you to provide your authentication information others. Once you have it connected, then you're able to really attribute a specific disclosure requirement to that particular connector. In this case, it is CSRD. The template is part of the Purview Compliance Manager. And now you would be able to see the various different disclosure requirement associated with the metrics from the Sustainable Data Solutions. The data that what we had in the Sustainable Data Solutions is seen as part of that. Now here is an experience where an auditor can go and test and verify each of those particular data and then share some kind of a status for those validation and then attribute certain comments. So that's how the assurance audit is typically done by an auditor. And this is how the sustainability practitioner would get to know whether all the data that what has been processed in the Sustainable Data Solutions is now ready and processed by the auditor from an audit perspective, and it's prepped, ready for us to go to your reporting requirement. At this point in time, I'd like to take a pause and then acknowledge some of the deep partnership that what we've been working with. We had a chance to work with UST Global, and they've been able to solve their sustainability-related requirement for their customers with Sustainable Data Solutions. And as part of solving the particular problem, here is a view where there were certain challenges that they were facing from their customer point of view, and how Sustainable Data Solutions were able to really help in some of those challenges. Unified platform for data integration and standardization is a common ask from their customers' point of view, and we were able to help that with Sustainable Data Solutions. Now, when it comes to sourcing the data for sustainability needs, there are different class of data sources. Certain class of data sources which is already being curated with the sustainability information, and the other sources where you need to be getting the raw data, and then you need to process it for your sustainability information. So irrespective of the data sources, we were able to ingest the data and then get the data to the appropriate lakehouse, and thereby accelerate the process of creating the sustainability data estate for a customer. Then there were challenges with regard to the analytics for actionable insights. Even as part of the data ingestion, there are needs where we need to be helping the customers to analyze the data, and we were able to help. Sustainable Data Solutions were able to help with some of those requirements as well. Streamlining the compliance, this was a huge ask because most of the customers are really looking for a very time-bound effort when it comes to creating the report, especially for an auditor, from an assurance perspective. And SDSF was able to help with ESG metrics capability to streamline the entire compliance and auditing purposes. Cost effectiveness is, of course, very critical. And Sustainable Data Solutions does not come with any cost by itself. It's a value prop in Microsoft Fabric. But the pricing model is purely based on the pay-as-you-go of Microsoft Fabric, and which just resonated really well with UST Global. And here are some of the key benefits that UST Global referred from Microsoft Fabric Sustainable Data Solutions point of view. SDS was able to help them quickly build custom ESG products, and thereby they were able to manage the customer's portfolio management when it comes to ESG really well. Data quality and standardization was, of course, part of the Sustainable Data Solutions based on the Microsoft Fabric artifacts, but then the schema was quite extensible enough for it to be also interoperable with several other industry semantic model, like the OPC and the OFP. This was really a great feedback and a value. Real-time data processing, as I mentioned, this is super important when it comes to meeting the requirement of the customers, not just from a reporting point of view, but from a product carbon footprint or supply chain management perspective in the context of sustainability. Built-in compliance, ESG metrics was able to help them with having certain built-in compliance related requirement when it comes to ESG standards and frameworks. And last but not the least, scalability and future-proofing. The entire capability is quite extensible. Even though we offer a lot of pre-built capability, everything is quite extensible for customers to go and build and compose based on their requirement. Now come the last piece of the presentation, which is to do with the data intelligence. got all this data into the SDSF, it's now very important for customers to really figure out like how they can leverage this for various of their sustainability initiatives. And these initiatives could be, with regard to reduction strategies, supply chain management improvement, product carbon footprint related requirements and stuff. So this is a capability that what we have not built into the sustainable data solutions yet, but then this is something which customers can leverage the Microsoft Fabric's capability and have a do-it-yourself experience explored. And we eventually look to have this built and offered as part of the sustainable data solutions. So let's look at some of the use case over here. The typical use case that what we have seen from an analytics point of view is in offering certain intelligence for various different need when it comes to the product carbon footprint or sustainability management and others. And this intelligence helps in a very data-driven approach when it comes to tackling some of these business-related initiatives. So in the demo, what we are trying to really help you understand from a do-it-yourself point of view is about really exploring, looking at all the scope 3 emissions and figuring out like which are the business activities that is attributing or contributing to large amount of emissions, right? And then from there, you will be able to really figure out like how you can really contain some of those or alter some of those business activities, and thereby you can get to your reduction strategy and stuff. And in the demo, we would look at to start from the ESG metric capability where we are able to really see the scope 3 emissions. And as we look through the scope 3 emissions, we are able to process that information with several other capabilities of Microsoft Fabric, like the ML model and AI skill kind of capabilities which can be leveraged. And here, we are able to process the processed ESG data lake that what we have in arriving at some of the scope 3 emissions. And I'll quickly walk through the notebook where we are actually running some of the ML model as part of the ML flow. And here, the model that what we're using is a fit ML model, which is going to help us in distilling, which are the scope 3 emissions that is contributing, to increase in emissions and stuff. And here is the kind of a data science view that what we have in the Fabric, where we have created various different models, the same model, but with different parameter conditions so that we can really run this particular model against our data in the sustainable data solutions. And this is the fit forecast that what we have done. And once we run this model, now here you can see that the blue lines are all the emissions information that what we have learned from a scope 3 point of view. This is all actual. And the dark purple graph is more to do with the forecasting that what we're able to do, right? So here you can see the forecasting actually is able to help in distilling into various different time range beyond the actual information as well. The next part of the scenario is all about do-it-yourself reduction activity impact, which is about water for carbon intensity kind of a data. Now here again, what we're trying to do is that got an understanding of, in the previous demo, you must have seen an understanding of these are the emissions based on the scope 3 categories that is contributing to the maximum emissions in an environment. In this case, it is to do with mobile combustion distance and mobile combustion fuel quantity, as well as the stationary combustion quantity. Now, here in the subsequent what-if analysis, what we're trying to do is that figuring out like doing certain changes, how we would be able to really moderate that particular reduction strategy for those emission categories. And we are able to run over here a regression model, and again, based on the notebook in the sustainable data solutions. And here in the result, we would be able to see that, if you really look at the mobile combustion model, it's going to take, much more faster rate at which we would be able to achieve the reduction, reduced emissions by 2026. But then if you're really looking at the, the other combustion model, stationary combustion model, that's going to take more time for us to get to the emission reduction and stuff. So these are the kind of deep ML model-related analysis that what can achieve out of the Microsoft Fabric's capability along with the sustainability data solutions and stuff. All righty, hope this was helpful. I'm just keeping some time for us to have a Q&A. And here is learn more about Microsoft Fabric. You can kind of scan the QR code and then learn more about the Fabric information. Open to questions.
So you said that the solution is available, I guess, free. You just pay for the compute, obviously.
Right.
So are the industry solutions options available now, or are those coming in the future? I did a search, and it kind of led through a free trial that looks like it's related to
Yeah.
Manager. That's a larger package.
Yeah. Yeah.
How does all that fit together?
That's right. So I guess the healthcare-related industry solution is also available, generally available. I think so. That's the announcement that what we saw in Arun's session yesterday. There are a couple of other industry solutions which are still in works. And the second question is about how they're going to interoperate between these industry solutions and stuff. So that's the beauty of Microsoft Fabric when it comes to having a common lakehouse. You would be able to really have these particular data models interoperable because they're all coming out of the same industry data model schema.
So I should see the industry solutions that have GA, which ESG would be one of those.
Correct.
Soon.
That is right. Yeah, yeah. Any other question? All righty. So thanks a lot for your time. I hope this was helpful. The whole idea was to provide you a brief overview of sustainable data solutions, the kind of value that what you're able to bring in, especially for the highly needed ESG-related requirement, especially on regulatory reporting and reduction strategies that customers are really trying to focus and build value for. And yeah, this slide is all about, there's going to be FabCon sometime in March and April 2025. Please keep following all our improvements that what we do in the sustainable data solutions and otherwise can be learned out of these particular event. Thanks a lot.